Welcome to the Bookers Alliance podcast, where we hold the pencil and the pencil is power. Coming at you right now is your host, Marky Mark, along with the man, the myth, the legend, Frank Donaldson. Join us as we discuss the ever-changing landscape of professional wrestling. So hang on tight, you jabronis, and enjoy the ride. All right, welcome in, everybody. Thank you for joining today's episode of the Bookers Alliance podcast. Come on in, grab yourself a ringside seat, some covers, some popcorn, some shelter. I mean, we got everything going on today because today's topic, we're talking about TV war games. How we doing, Frank?
Oh, we're good. We're good this week. I mean, we're coming off a head-to-head contest between AEW, Title Tuesday, and WWE NXT.
Yeah, NXT, they wound up in a set of circumstances where they were going head-to-head for the first time in a long time against AEW Dynamite. And that, you know, TBS has got some changes that are happening as far as sports right now. So I believe the baseball games might have pushed hockey?
Yeah,
so they
hockey tournament tonight.
Yeah, so that pushed old Dynamite over to Tuesday, and then all of a sudden everything went ballistic to hell in a handbasket. All of a sudden, you get people throwing out names left and right, TV runovers, pre-shows,
insults.
The whole 9 yards.
Yeah, they didn't hold back. When they said head-to-head and war, they meant war. I mean, they didn't, nobody pulled any punches. You got the big guns coming out on both sides.
Yeah, it was definitely interesting. So let's kind of start with kind of what happened. So I think WWE got wind of Dynamite moving.
Yep.
And then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, we get told, Big Match John is going to be coming to NXT.
Yeah, I mean, that's a statement there. Yeah. When John Cena's on your third show, that's saying something. That's saying that they're putting a little bit of stock into that particular show.
The GOAT, the 16-time world heavyweight champion, John.
I mean, movie star galore. This is a Hollywood A-lister at this point now. And he's on the C show. That's a lot there.
Yep. And then to boot, we all of a sudden get told that since John was going to be in the corner of Carmelo, that old Paul Heyman, the wise man himself, was going to be in the corner of Braun Breaker.
Braun Breaker, which it seems like a kind of a mismatch, right? I mean, Paul's doing his thing with the bloodline, and then all of a sudden he gets into, a wrestler with a completely different bloodline. It's like, was there nowhere else they could go with this, or did they just need to find a way to get Paul on the show? Or
got some thoughts.
Okay,
I'll continue on in a little bit.
All right, but I don't want to bury the lead here.
But that's how it all started. That's how it started. And then old TK, he had to posture up and goes, no, yeah, we're gonna do this counter programming thing. Is this what's really, really gonna happen? Well, how about let's do this? Let's put Adam Copeland, the rated R superstar. Cope. We're
trademarking it now. We're calling him Cope. We've been calling him Cope since his debut. We're calling him Cope.
Yep. So we're gonna put him on Dynamite and let that be his first match in AEW.
Yep, that's what they
did. Ain't even gonna
did.
save that for a pay-per-view.
No,
they're just gonna throw that out there on a Dynamite.
No, I mean, AEW with their sporadic pay-per-views anyway, a lot of times their Wednesday show is more pay-per-view-ish than the pay-per-views. It's been rumored before that TNT may have a little stake in the company or whatnot. So they may be on the same path of WCW, where they were more of a TV company than they were a wrestling entity, I guess you would say. Obviously their content is wrestling, but if the TV station's got a stake in it, or if they've got a bid in it or something like that, they kind of want that return on investment. They want TV ratings. Right. They want to see their product go stack up against the quote unquote competition, who isn't really their competition, but I mean, whatever. But they want to see their product stand strong against the quote unquote competition. The only thing is, first of all, I heard a lot of people already talking this week about WWE had to pull out the big guns. They had to bring in the main roster characters to compete with AEW. Well, I call foul on that, first of all. We'll get into it later, but My thinking is AEW also pulled out the WWE main roster big guns to come and perform on their show to compete with WWE. So when you look at it that way, it's like, all right, you know, but yeah, the conversation will lead into that a little bit more. But I call foul on that, you know, for the fact that they're all WWE talent and they performed on a WWE show. AEW talent performed on an AEW show. So it's as head-to-head as WWE wanted to make it. And, I mean, the ratings haven't come out yet, but we should be getting them soon, and then we'll see exactly how it played out. But, again, I got my personal feelings on it. I know you got your feelings on it, so we'll work our way into that.
Yeah, and then we got some other matches that you didn't think would kind of pop up. All of a sudden, you had Asuka just all of a sudden announced for a match. You had Cody Rhodes being announced for an announcement.
It turned out to be the special guest general manager for the whole night.
And you know, and then AEW says, well, okay, we're going to throw a pre-show on it. Yep. And on the pre-show, we're going to throw our Ring of Honor World Heavyweight Champion in a match.
Yep, there you go. And then they had a cold open with Christian, and they went commercial free, and then NXT decided to go commercial free, and then WWE decided to pop The Undertaker at the end of the show. Then AEW decided to overrun so they could get the cast-off audience from WWE.
I mean,
there was a lot of positioning going on in this particular war.
I looked at last night kind of like, like a World War I scene where you've got, you know, your Allied forces dug in on one side of the field, and you got your German forces dug in on the other side of the field, and they're just volleying shots across the field.
Yeah, like you said, it just kind of we're just gonna keep going and going until somebody can't go no more. So.
Now, granted, as a wrestling fan, all we got to do is sit back and eat cake. That's all we got to do.
I mean, so there's you tribalists out there that are listening that only watch one show or refuse to watch you hate one brand and you love one, or you lost out on. You lost out
because you missed the other half of what. Yeah,
because when you get something like this as a overall wrestling fan, I mean, that's called getting your cake and eating it too.
Absolutely.
I mean, you get 2 good hours of wrestling on one show. You got basically 3 hours on another show. I mean, they packed it in. It isn't like they went out there and kind of, went through the motions and whatnot. They put a lot of top characters out there. Now, how it translated into TV, again, that's where our personal thoughts will come in and our opinions on how it translated over to TV. But the fact of the matter is, when you look at the roster that they have and the names that they presented, I mean, they brought the big guns out on both sides.
Absolutely. Because then they tagged, AEW tagged their show Title Tuesday.
Yeah, Title Tuesday, where you had a lot of titles up for grabs, a couple title switches. I mean, when you're doing that on TV, you're putting a lot out there for, your audience. So you're trying to drag your audience, and we all know there's crossover. I mean, anybody who thinks that when AEW gets 800, 900,000 viewers on Wednesday and NXT gets 5 or 6 on a typical Tuesday, those ain't different people. I mean, at least I'd say 60 to 70% of those are crossover.
Oh yeah.
So when you have a head-to-head, that's kind of where you get the, okay, now we're calling, we're going to call your bluff right now. Somebody's going to get exposed in this because that crossover ain't happening like in the Monday Night Wars. Back in the day, if you weren't VCR and what you have, so for VCR,
for your youngins,
right? For those of you who don't know, VCR is a video cassette recorder. That's what we used to use before DVR, but same difference. But if you weren't VCR'd it, I mean, you either had 2 TVs on in your house and you're like running back and forth from room to room. Or, I mean, you were flip-flopping channels all night. Like my remotes used to have like last channel or previous.
Last channel button.
So I would hit one, like whichever. I think Nitro usually started earlier. So I'd watch Nitro until that opening of Raw because I knew the opening was going to be hot. So then I'd go over to Raw. Well, then it's previous channel all night long after that. You get a dull moment in one show, you switch over to the other one, which that actually happened last night. So we could get into that too a little bit later. But I mean, it was flip-flop. Well, now with streaming, with DVR, I mean, DVR is like video cassette recorder, VCR. Right. DVR is literally click a button real quick and keep it moving.
Yep.
everybody can do it. So now you're not forced to pick and choose. You may choose to pick and choose like whatever interests you at 8:00, when both shows start. But on the back end, even with most smart TVs now, it's recording the other channel you watched, whether you even set it to. So if you get really into a segment on one show, you don't have to worry about, what I'm missing on the other show or blah, blah. You wait till a dead segment comes in on that show, you flip-flop over, rewind a little back.
Or just picture in picture it.
Yeah, or you picture in picture it, then you're watching them both, and whatever looks interesting, what most interesting at the time, you go hit it.
Yep.
So, it's not like it used to be where there's going to be a true ratings war. You're not going to get a ratings war these days, but... Again, I think when the ratings come out, I think it's going to put a little exposure on the gap in between the two companies.
Yeah. So the kind of the last shot that NXT fired over the bow, so to speak. NXT started running promos for the show, announcing everything, and then threw in a teaser right at the very end of the commercial, and all you heard was the screen go black and the Kong.
But when you heard it, you knew.
Yeah, you're like, okay, I just heard Taker's gong. What the hell?
So, and I'll be honest, as a 30-plus year of wrestling, once I heard that, my decision was made.
Absolutely.
Because I didn't know when he was coming.
When, how, what, who.
Exactly. So I'm like, well, I'm dialed in all night because I'm not going to miss Undertaker live only because of things like social media and other advancements we have in tech. If you miss it, if you've flipped over to the other channel, let's say Undertaker rides out there at 9:15 and somehow or another you're over there watching the start of the Edge Luchasaurus match, and then all of a sudden you start getting bigs on social media and you scroll over to TikTok and it gets ruined. Oh, hell no. Now you're heated. Now I'm mad at the show that I was watching because it made me miss what I was waiting for all night on the other damn show.
Yep.
So I had to sign into NXT all night because I didn't want to get secondhand Undertaker. I wanted Undertaker live and in living color.
And I think, WWE kind of knew that.
Oh, yeah. Think about when he came out. He came out after the last match of the night.
Who is not going to stick around to see what's going to happen with The Undertaker? I dare say you're going to find somebody that goes, yeah, I never was an Undertaker fan.
They're out there.
That dude was around for 30 years, went through how many iterations of his character? He went through changes, so many changes that, along the way, you might look at it and go, yeah, I wasn't a fan of the Ministry of Darkness part, but I love the American Badass part. Yeah. So, stuff like that. But yeah, once you heard that gong of The Undertaker, you're like, oh, I got to figure this out. What is going on?
Absolutely. So. And this isn't unprecedented. I don't know how many of you all were watching this intently back in 2010, but way back when TNA had hired Hulk Hogan and hired Eric Bischoff and a few other people, and they were going to run head to head with WWE. They were coming on Monday night. They were going to do a Monday night debut. It was going to be the debut of Hulk Hogan. It was going to be the debut of the whole new look of the show. They went from the 6-sided ring to the 4-sided ring, hyped it for a couple of weeks beforehand, did everything humanly possible because they said, even if it's only for one night, we're going to put WWE in the dirt tonight. We're going to out-ratings them like ain't nobody out-ratings them since 83 weeks in WCW. What WWE do? They dusted Bret Hart off out of the woodworks.
Out of the mothballs.
And brought him, they dusted him off, brought him out of the woodworks.
Yep.
Hadn't been seen in the company in over 13 years. They trounced TNA. TNA got a third of what their ratings were when it was all said and done because, people hadn't seen Hulk Hogan in a few years. So there was intrigue. There was definitely interest. You hadn't seen Bret Hart in a WWE ring and never thought you would again.
Right.
Up until that point.
He was in Ultimate Warrior territory.
Exactly. Yeah. He was in exile. He was gone. He had done everything he could to say bad about WWE. He'd shoot interviews on the program when he was in WCW.
Yep.
Everything he could possibly do to trounce WWE, he did. And they got him to come back this night. And TNA only had the TNA roster plus Hulk Hogan to combat. Oh, no. So basically, the story was already written. It was a foregone conclusion. You can send out whoever you want over on the TNA side tonight. You ain't going to beat what we got over in store over here. Same thing happened last night. AEW could have got anybody and everybody that's available as a free agent right now to come over to the AEW show. But once that Undertaker gong hit, I mean, the foregone conclusion was told.
Yeah.
It was a wrap that everybody, we haven't seen Undertaker in what, a year and a half?
Since the Hall of Fame.
Yeah, so I mean, that was 2 Hall of Fames ago, wasn't it? So I mean, we're a year and a half in at least.
Yep.
No way that people aren't going to tune in to see the Undertaker live and in living color.
And he guaranteed something too the last time he went away. He said the dead man gimmick is just that.
Yeah.
It's dead. And he's holding to that, which, that's a side note, a side conversation, but I'm thankful to that. I admire that.
Yeah, absolutely.
As a fan of his, I'm like, okay, you're sticking to your word, because that character had a ride off into the sunset match, and we're good with that. And you can still come back as Mark, you can still come back as the American badass, but leave the dead man just where he is.
Well, if you remember, if you look at it, he essentially created a gimmick going into retirement. Yeah. He created the retirement gimmick.
He created Mark. He created himself.
This badass dude that can come back and lay the smack down whenever's necessary. He can come kick a little ass whenever he wants. But he's retired. He's a dad. He's an old guy now. He's an over the hiller, as they call it. He created that character for himself to always be able to come back as long as he's physically capable and do what he did last night. Get in there, do a couple of moves, and set the fans on fire.
And he said it himself. He said, I'm the kind of in case of emergency break glass. And last night they broke the glass.
Well, I mean, they almost put WWE in that territory where you're going to pull out the big gun.
Yep.
And I know I keep saying they pull out the big guns. Let me reiterate a thought that I had earlier. The big guns, the WWE still didn't pull out the big guns.
No.
If WWE really wanted to trounce AEW, what they would do is they would simply move their show over to Wednesday night and then bring Roman Reigns out every week.
Yeah.
That essentially would put AEW out of business, at least television business. They may operate as an indie, but TNT isn't going to look at their slagging ratings, because if Roman Reigns strolls out there at the start of every NXT show, he lives in Florida. He lives, half hour away? He can simply drive down there, come out there, do the same thing he does on SmackDown on NXT, and nobody would watch AEW anymore. That part, it may be up for discussion, but it's essentially a fact.
So there's something to that I'll elaborate on here in a few minutes.
Okay. We're leaving a lot of teasers here in the lead in, so I know everybody's getting geared in their seats. I hope they're getting their popcorn ready, cracking open a cold one.
Let's quit teasing and let's start digging into it a little bit. So we talked about the shots that were fired, but let's talk about what actually went down. So I want to kick it off by looking at a couple of things from NXT. Okay. So NXT, you had a women's match between arguably one of the best women to ever do it in NXT, and that would be Asuka. And then Roxanne Perez, which is this huge she's not an upstart per se.
Yeah, she's a former NXT champion.
But she's also a former NXT champion.
She's seen some success.
But she's also a Booker T protege. Yeah. But you've got there's some story with her already being built, right? Yeah. So you got to see them in a match. You also got to see Tegan Knox get into a match on, was it Raw or was it NXT that she got in on the match?
That was NXT when she strolled out there in the tank and all that. Another surprise, something that you didn't expect.
So, but you got to see some of this that started building and you started seeing some things. You got to see 2 other well-established characters go at a match. You got to see Carmelo Hayes. You got to see Braun Breaker. Mm-hmm. You got to see a couple other kind of upstarts, so to speak, in this barroom brawl match that they had, right? Mm-hmm.
You got the champion. You got Ilya Dragunov there.
So you got him versus Dom with a special guest referee out of the blue.
Right. Bringing back another homegrown talent, quote unquote.
With it being LA Knight. Yeah.
Who's essentially one of the hottest acts in wrestling right now.
So take that. Take what I just told you right there. Now let's look at what AEW threw on the table. You got Paige versus Sheeta.
Yep.
In a match.
Yep.
You got Orange Cassidy, which was supposed to be Jon Moxley.
Yeah.
You got Orange Cassidy versus Ray Phoenix
Yep.
in a match. You got Hobbs versus Jericho, in a squash match, basically. You got
something like that. I don't know if Chris knows squash match. I mean, it's been a long time for him to do one. I don't know if he knows. I don't know if he remembers squash matches. That was old school wrestling.
So you got Wardlow, which I don't even remember who he fought because it was a squash match.
Do we even know who he fought?
I don't.
I mean, I remember Evan Courageous, but what's his new name? Matt Seidel.
Matt Seidel.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So
for whatever purpose that serves. I mean, he went out there, ate 4 power bombs, and then called it one.
Yep.
So what a way to use Matt Seidel, guys.
so now, said all that saying this, and of course, AEW had Cope versus Luchasaurus.
Yeah. They're their main event.
Yep. So we've had these matches, right? Now, let me put it to you this way. If I was one show that was trying to elevate new talent, new faces, new names, new blood, which show did that better?
Well, NXT definitely did that better, but that's kind of by default because their characters are all new and they're all upcoming. They're all striving to get to the top. AEW's characters, as far as AEW is concerned, are at the top. So, I mean, you had Swerve and Daniel Bryan. I don't know why, but it was a good match. I mean, I enjoyed watching it.
Great match.
But there was no story. There was no reason.
Now,
I mean, it was just two guys having a match.
Right.
And then the winner is going to fight for the TNT. When have these two guys had any of involvement with the TNT title before last night?
Yep.
Daniel Bryan is a perennial heavyweight contender. Let's call a spade, right? Swerve, I could see with the TNT title. That might be a good, first belt for him to get. But up until last night, I had heard him sniff hide nor hair of the TNT title. And then they spawned both characters off into their existing storylines, putting Swerve back with Hangman Page, who I have no clue why he was even out there. I guess it was just a way to get him on TV. Well, then you got all of a sudden Christian came out to attack Daniel Bryan. Okay, to get an advantage before the title match. Okay, I get it, but why? I mean,
right.
There could be story, or there just could be matches. WWE's always been that. Let's give you a story. Let's give you, a couple side dishes with your main course. We're gonna give you the potatoes, the corn, the collard greens. We're gonna give you all that. Then we're gonna slap a big old steak on there at the top when we bring out Undertaker, Braun Breaker, and Carmelo. AEW, they said, you know what? We're on the Atkins diet. We're just gonna give you all meats. We're gonna bring you some meat appetizer, then a meat main course, then a meat dessert, and a meat nightcap, and then you're gonna go home and call it one.
Yep.
I'm sorry, but that's really all I could come up with on that.
But with
a person can only survive so much on a strictly meat diet.
I was about to say, you need other things.
Yeah, you got to have other stuff to right. Your body needs other things to operate, and AEW is going to have to learn at some point in time that they need other things more than dream matches and great in-ring quality matches to compete.
Yep.
If you're just going to run a wrestling show, great. If that's their goal, fine. They're doing a bang up job at it. There ain't no indie show that's doing it better for what they're doing. But they're calling themselves competition with WWE, and the fact of the matter is they're not. And that's why, because WWE is putting on an entertainment show that happens to have a lot of physical wrestling going on. AEW is putting on a wrestling show, period.
They're putting on a wrestling show, period, and they're not helping the fans connect the dots to some of these faces that keep showing up.
No, I mean, short of the fact that you just want to see them. Yeah. I mean, like right now, I was getting interested in the Swerve Hangman thing, right? So I want to see Swerve come out there, but I want to see him do stuff related to Hangman. I mean, yeah, they ended it that way, but that's kind of like my dad used to say, that's closing the bar door after the cow got out. We done sat and watched, and that was commercial free. So we done sat and watched Swerve go for 30 minutes, essentially straight. For what reason?
Yep. So the other things that happened on that last night when I'm talking about new talent, right? So if you look at Roxanne Perez, okay, look at how she shined against Asuka.
Uh-huh.
She really shined in that match.
Yeah. Asuka gave a lot.
Look how
she gave a lot.
Look how Carmelo and Braun, look how they shined against each other.
But let's get into the Asuka match more before. So Asuka wrestled, former NXT, longest NXT reigning champion ever. All the accolades she got out of NXT. She essentially comes back home and pulls a preeminent character up.
Right.
It's not a pull down. She pulls that character up.
Bingo.
And says, hey, yeah, I beat you, but you can compete. I just showed that you're good enough to compete with me. Bully Ray always says it all busted open. A lot of times it's not who goes over, it's who gets over. Roxanne got over in that.
Absolutely.
Regardless of the loss.
She hung with her for a while.
Absolutely. And the loss was insignificant, right? Yeah. I mean, that really didn't matter. But the reason I went back to that match is if you want to compare it, now compare that to the Saraya and
Sheeta match.
Sheeta match. What new talent did that bring up?
None.
Sheeta's now a three-time champion.
She's an AEW homer.
Yeah, she's been there since the beginning. She was the first NXT AEW women's champion, if I remember right. But she definitely is a three-time champion. And then you've got Saraya, who's been wrestling on the main screen for 10 years.
Yeah.
So short of getting the belt off of Saraya, which means they may have needed to do that. They may have been a thing. Short of that, though, what did they accomplish with that match?
So they're that match and the international championship match.
There's more. I mean, I'm just trying to focus on some of the highlight matches.
But you're right. The title changes in either one of those matches made no sense at all. Like, okay, I'm sure that Ray was never supposed to win it to begin with.
Right. Yeah, we know that.
Mox was supposed to keep going. So now they've diverted back to one layer before Mox. Let's just give it back to Orange.
Well, I feel like they're trying to do a full reset on that. I feel like
Seems
they're trying
to. And then when Mox comes back, it'll be Orange versus Mox.
Exactly.
Again.
And then they'll put it right back on Mox, and then they'll go forward. Because the Mox injury came in there and they screwed up. And I think they're trying to play on the fact that, in, let's say, 6 months, when they figure this thing out, nobody will remember what happened now. But the fact of the matter
if you're gonna hot potato it, why not hot potato it to somebody that's never had it? Or
that would have been a good direction to put Swerve in. If you ain't got nothing else to do with Swerve except just have him go out there and job to Daniel Bryan or Bryan Danielson 5 nights after he just went over Hangman Page, then he comes out there and jobs.
Yep.
Instead of doing that, like you said, if you got nowhere to put a whole title and you're just looking for somewhere to move it, why not put him in that thing? And then you can have him and Hangman kind of go after the title in that vein of thought. But no, instead, we're just going to put it right back on the same guy who had it before, which same difference, did nothing for Ray Phoenix. I mean, who just won the title. That did 0 for him.
So right there, that did 0 for him, just like Hobbs' TNT championship did 0 for him, and Wardlow's TNT championship did 0 for him.
Multiple TNT championships.
So now you're bringing in these two big old monsters again with squash matches, so to speak. And I'm looking at them and I'm going, I don't know if I care.
So
who cares if they can go in there and squash somebody?
In the same vein of thought, Hobbs ran over Chris Jericho, right? Ran him over. What's that do? For what?
There's no reason.
So Jericho, as established as he is, he can take any kind of loss right now in wrestling. And it won't hurt his character at all. So fine. Okay, so you're going to go over Chris Jericho. Great. What's the purpose of going over Chris Jericho in a squash match? There's no story told. Yeah, Hobbs is a beast. Don't get me wrong. I mean, physically imposing as all hell. But in a wrestling ring, nobody expects Hobbs to just demolish a wrestler with the capabilities of Chris Jericho. So you're not really telling the story there. It's not like you're breaking out the creative handbook and saying, we're really going to write Hobbs up as a monster.
Right.
Hobbs is physically a monster character regardless. Going over Chris Jericho in that basically tells me Chris didn't feel like working hard that night. He said, hey, if I got to lose anyway, why are we going to go for an hour? Shit, we can do this in 10 minutes and call it a wrap. And then we can move back into whatever programs we really need to get into anyway. Which again goes back to the vein of thought of what was the purpose of the match? All we were doing was getting to the after stuff with Don Callis and all that. So then why have the match?
Just have him beat him up backstage and then get
to exactly. It'd be the same thing as a squash. I guess now, because Tony Khan says wins and losses matter, now you can put that win under Hobbs' belt. But For what?
Yeah. So obviously, you know, we're bagging on AEW pretty heavy, but the only thing from NXT that was really kind of a low spot, and you called it as we were texting back and forth last night, but the breakout women's tournament match.
Yeah.
So had they done a better job at giving me some backstory of these two women that were in there fighting, maybe I would have paid that a little bit more attention.
Yeah.
I will say it was a great match as far as, you know, the back and forth and everything, and both of them ladies could go. It was just I had no vested interest in it.
Yeah. So as I was watching it, I mean, and I'll be honest, at one point while I was watching, I literally thought I had accidentally switched over to AEW because I was like, damn, how Dynamite get on the TV? Because first of all, I didn't know who they were, and that's a staple of Dynamite to just throw some characters out there and just let them have a match. Didn't know who they were, didn't know why they were out there wrestling. I wasn't listening to the commentary like that. I was just kind of trying to enjoy the show. So I didn't hear whatever the announcers were probably saying, but if it was, so I know Booker T was one of the announcements, so I know he spent most of the match saying something along the lines of, yeah, and hey, and ah, and ooh, and what the fuck, but come on now.
So as far as any of the backstory, there was only one snippet of backstory that was told. Apparently, the lady that was in there, that was Latina, she is MMA background. Had no clue, but apparently she's got an MMA background. Vic Joseph said that like very quick. In the match.
So probably the most important piece of information they could have offered.
And then
he glossed over it.
Awesome. And I'm like,
but I'm sure Booker followed in with a and, all right,
shucky ducky.
Exactly. Quack quack. Come on.
But so I want to get down to some of the meat and potatoes with the Undertaker thing real quick.
Well, wait, before we get into the Undertaker, because I mean that, so I do want to talk about, like you said, we are kind of heavy on AEW. I don't want it to come across so much that way. It was a competition, so they are going to be judged against each other. So somebody is going to come on the short end of the stick. But it's not like AEW didn't have highlights. I mean, they had bright spots. The brightest spot, probably the thing that made me laugh out loud literally the most, was the two split screen segments with Toni Storm and Don. Now, Toni Storm, the story that she's telling, I'm interested in that, right?
So Toni right now is spinning something up that really you don't get in AEW a lot. You're getting a story of a character.
Exactly. And I'm interested in it because of that. Now, I get it. The majority of AEW fans probably hate that, so that's probably why they did it on the split screen.
But it was a silent movie.
Yeah, and exactly. It was right, and that's what it was intended to be. She was showing, the range of, hey, I could be doing this while this is going on. But when they do the split screen thing, I kind of zone out on the whole thing
or fast forward.
Yeah, because I'm not watching the little screen to watch wrestling, and I'm not interested in the commercial.
Right.
The fact that they actually had something to give me to watch during the commercial was ingenious. Because it took me from a commercial that, like, even if I would have fast forwarded, I watched, I watched while I was at work, so I couldn't necessarily fast forward like I normally would. But if I get a look at it and I see it, I got to fast forward through it. But because I saw something that looked interesting in the corner of my eye, I'm like, wait a minute. So, I ended up interested in that segment. The same thing with Don Callis when they took him over to the screen, and then all of a sudden I saw Takashita pull up the little. I'm like, hey, wait a minute. This is like a TikTok video. This is going to be interesting.
Started reading it.
So that kind of stuff, that's brilliant. Lean into that more. Whoever's idea that was, whoever came up with it, go knock on their door today and say, hey, I need you to come help out with some of our storytelling. Because now, granted, those are both, Don Callis has been all around the horn. I mean, he's been everywhere, but he's also gone through WWE. And then Toni Storm is most recently a WWE product. So they've learned how to round out the business. They've learned the entertainment side of it. And, they both developed it, so they have a different aspect to bring into it than maybe some of the other people. But, I mean, as we said earlier, the majority of the main players on AEW's roster now are from WWE. So they also have that same ability. You just have to get it out of them. I mean, you can't let them have all this knowledge of how to do an entertainment show and not let them execute it.
And I will say the other bright spot for me, And we talked about, right before we started the show, we talked about, was there anything that AEW put on last night that would have made you flip over from NXT?
Yeah, we talked about that, and I said yeah, but my answer was no. There was nothing.
There was nothing as a wrestling fan that going, I wonder what's going on over there.
Exactly.
Now, granted, I was scrolling through Twitter, looking at things, but at the same time, it was like there was nothing. The one bright spot for me before we get to the Undertaker stuff, Christian Cage's promo.
Yeah.
Not the cold open, but the promo where he was talking
where he actually
to Edge.
Came out there and explained his side
and he was talking about Beth, and he was talking.
About, that was pushing the edges, but funny there. But if you remember, Seth Rollins and Edge kind of did this exact same gimmick before. So this isn't uncharted territory. Beth's a worker. Beth's a wrestler at heart. They know what they're getting into when they let these kind of storylines go. And I'm sure they're both game with it because they know it'll work. But, that stuff was great. But again, you're taking two WWE guys, showcasing them and letting them bring in the entertainment side of the business. And it was interesting. It made you want to watch it.
Yep.
I would have flipped over from, I think at that time, that was probably when LA Knight was coming out. I would have flipped over from LA Knight to watch it, but I definitely would have rewound to watch it on when NXT was over.
And the other thing that I want to say real quick that went on in AEW last night, I want to keep time going here, but I want to say this real quick. I'm going to put my statement out about it. You feel how you going to feel. Everybody's got their opinions, but the Juice Robinson roller quarters MJF thing, that was too far. that was too
so
far. Even though I know they're saying MJF cleared it.
Yeah.
And that roller quarters thing is Juice's weapon anyway.
That's his gimmick, but I think
that was too far.
Culturally in the world right now, this might not have been the best time to pull something like that just because of the the connotation that MJF has already given with it, about the comments that were made to him as he was getting, hit with quarters and blah, blah, blah. Just with what's going on in the real world right now, this may not have been the most, culturally sensitive time to do it. That may have been one of the most tone-deaf things that they've ever let happen in AEW.
I've watched a lot of things roll through AEW, and I'm going, how in the hell did somebody clear that?
Yeah.
But at the same time, I get it. It's if there is any storytelling that's going on in AEW, it's usually with MJF.
Yeah.
So I get it. I get how it plays into his story.
Well, the easy answer to what you just said is how they let it. TNT and TBS have no idea what the connotation was from that. They don't know MJF's story.
Yeah.
So all they saw him say was, I'm going to hit you with a roller quarter. People have been hitting people with a roller quarters in wrestling for millennia. I mean, that's a common weapon. So TNT, TBS don't understand the underlying connotation behind it to say, with what's going on overseas right now, this may not be the day to do that, Jim.
And I even had to explain to somebody today, like, why that was not cool that was said.
Did you? Are they a listener? Because if they're not, they should be listening. What the hell?
But
if they had those questions, if they had just listened, they could have known the answers to it and went and told other people what all the knowledge.
So maybe it got approved because they're like, not too many people's paying attention to that. But I'm sorry, that's a little too over the line. That's pushing the Katie Vick line.
Yeah, I mean, so. And maybe we're oversensitive to it because we've been under the WWE, umbrella for so long. WWE, with their anti-bullying stance and things like that, they immediately would have been like, no, we're not addressing any bullying. We're not gonna, we're not even gonna imply that, that you're gonna do this or whatever. We may loosely show someone bullying someone because they've done that story a million times, but we're not just gonna go out there and say something like that because, if there's, let's say, I don't know, impressionable young teenagers watching the show and they're like, hey, we could go do the same thing. Ain't hard to get a roll of quarters. So and that probably would have been a thing WWE would have been like, let's
just stay away
from not do that. Yeah. But, AEW, again, they push the envelope. So as you said, I get it. But, maybe if they'd have done it 2 weeks ago, they probably would have had a softer landing.
Yeah. All right. So let's dig into the thing that I observed with The Undertaker. So obviously,
you don't want to talk about Edge and Luchasaurus?
Nah,
that was a match that happened.
Yeah, exactly. That happened. It wasn't even that great of a match.
No, it was so. Yeah, just to go over it real quick, we just saw Edge wrestle a month ago. So I mean, he wrestled Sheamus not too long ago.
Well, I mean,
so
this whole match between him and Luchasaurus was all him mounting a comeback. I mean, it was boring. And I've gotten to the point where when I start seeing matches like that, I immediately just start hitting the fast forward button. If I've DVR'd it.
If it had to been Edge, that probably would have been what happened. I probably would have kind of smoked through half of it or not paid. I mean, I found myself again. I was watching it while I was already busy, so I found myself not pulling myself away from what I was doing to watch the match because it was just slow. I mean, it dragged, and I get it. Edge was trying to tell a WWE style story in the match, but AEW the commentators can't fill in for what story he was trying to tell.
Yep.
They should have been able to. I mean, you got top tier commentators out there, but that's not AEW style. They don't have, let's call a spade a spade. They don't have a Vince McMahon in their headset telling them, say this, say this.
Right.
They don't have a Triple H in their headset saying, get this across, get this across. They got Tony Khan, who was probably sitting over there watching the match like a fan with the rest of us. He's supposed to be whistling stuff into the headset, and he was probably sitting there jaw dropped, wiping his nose all night watching the match. So,
but the Undertaker thing. So he comes out all of a sudden at the end of the Carmelo Hayes Braun Breaker match. Braun Breaker stands up in the middle of the ring and he declares that he's the biggest badass, around, right?
Yep.
Of course,
big dog.
That's Roman's thing.
Well, yeah, it was. Okay, well, Braun said it's his yard now. Braun should have said that. Why did that line not happen? He literally should have said, I'm the biggest, baddest dog in this yard right now.
But that drew the ire of the American badass who came out on a beautiful motorcycle, drove around the ring, got in the ring.
That motorcycle was NXT ain't like WWE.
No.
That little ramp and that ring was
halfway around.
No, that ramp and that ring was kind of short for Undertaker. I saw him hit around that first curve, and I was like, "Yeah, Undertaker ain't going no more."
But he got on the mic. He got on the mic, and what did he tell Breaker? What did he tell him? He said, "Look, boy," he said, "you might think you a badass, but just when you think you a badass, there's an older, wiser, bigger." Badass just waiting around the corner.
Yep.
So after all was said and done, I sent you a gift. What gift did I send you? The Undertaker and
Undertaker behind AJ.
Behind
Styles.
AJ, kind of creeping up.
Uh-huh.
Everybody's seen that gift by now. AJ looks around and he's caught off by surprise. Right. Replace AJ with TK. What Undertaker had to say to Braun Breaker last night wasn't meant for Braun Breaker.
I love it. I did not put that correlation together. That's awesome, though.
That was meant for Tony Khan.
Yeah, and if it wasn't, it should have been. And if Tony didn't catch it, Tony, when you tune into this podcast, and I know you're listening, when you tune in, understand that correlation stands true. There's always going to be that bigger, better, older dog that is waiting to kick your ass at any given moment. So, and like we, kind of what we alluded to earlier, if you think you got a bigger show than you pulled out on Title Tuesday, go ahead and set it up. Go ahead and advertise it. Go ahead and start sending shots on social media. WWE doesn't have to dig as deep as they went last night to again, if they say Roman Reigns is gonna appear, tie in with the Paul Heyman being with Braun Breaker thing. If they say that Roman Reigns is going to appear, AEW might as well not broadcast that night.
So that's the other thing that I wanted to touch on too before we wrap things up. I wanted to touch on the fact of what are they doing right now in NXT? It's completely different than any other time in NXT. They're still focusing on the homegrown talent, right? Yeah. But they're bringing down, and we touched on it earlier, they're bringing down main roster stars to elevate.
Pull these guys up.
Pull these people up. But, they're only doing it so many times because eventually these people don't need that anymore.
No, eventually these people will be on the main roster, then they'll be going back.
That's just like
hand up to the next guy.
Right. Carmelo and Braun didn't need Cena and Paul.
No.
They didn't need that.
No, that was their first time wrestling on USA. I mean, they were going to draw a rating regardless.
Exactly. But the thing is, though, is I'm starting to see the cookbook forming that Shawn Michaels and Triple H has got cooking in the kitchen. I'm starting to see it's like, NXT is not really developmental. It's not really just solely that.
No.
It's not our triple A anymore. What we're going to use that for, though, is these people who may not be getting time on the main roster.
Yeah. Let's
Let's cycle them down there so they can have matches with these up-and-coming talent. Let's help to elevate. And if you catch fire while you're down there, you're coming back up to the main roster on fire with a story already built.
Look at Finn Balor. I mean, if we're going to talk about it really quick, Finn Balor was kind of stagnant for a while. He won the Universal title, he got injured, went away, came back. He flailed around in mid-card, kind of just did what he did. Went down to NXT, got the championship, put a couple guys, brought a couple guys, got him elevated, then went back up to the main roster. Now he's in a main storyline. Speaking of, though, did you notice Christian's line to Edge last night where Edge had told him, what Judgment Day did to him, where they took all his information and then they kicked him out?
Yeah.
Did you notice Edge or Christian sent that shot back to him and said, hey, that's not what's going to happen to me.
Yeah.
Because I didn't pick those kind of guys. I picked top tier winners here. I'm like, well, wait a minute. Okay. Nice little shot fired there. For those of y'all who didn't catch it, that was a shot fired there.
But as we said earlier, even though we saw good things, we saw bad things, what a time to be a wrestling fan.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, who would have ever thought on a Tuesday night you're going to get something like that?
Yeah.
And it just organically came out of the blue.
Yep.
Because
thank you, NHL.
Thank you, NHL, because of hockey.
Exactly. Because of hockey, we got an Undertaker sighting. I mean, we got stuff all over the place on both shows. What we did get, though, the one lacking thing that would have put AEW over the top, no Britt Baker. What happened there?
Baker.
Had we got the doctor in the house, I feel like they would have been a ratings contender. But without the doctor, I mean, I know she's got to take care of Adam Cole, but I feel like Adam Cole probably could have been okay for a night.
So I'm going to put a theory on this, and we'll tease this for another episode.
All right.
Britt Baker leaving her dental practice would be a completely different Britt Baker in AEW.
Yeah.
I can see if she left the real world job, if she was full time, we would have probably one of the best ever women's runs that we've seen in AEW.
If she was full-time, 100% dedicated to wrestling, she'd probably already be in WWE. But we're going to leave it at that. We're just going to go ahead and tap out on
Cargill.
That one. Exactly. We're going to tap out on that one.
All right, everybody. Thank you for listening to today's episode. Drop us a line on our social media platforms. Let us know what you thought. If you thought, some of our opinions may have been wrong, hey, put yourself out there. We ain't going to say we're going to smack you down, but we might lay the smack down.
And don't bring your AEW opinion with you. You bring your WWE level opinion with you so you can compete.
Ouch, shots fired again. All right, thank you, everybody. And with that, we bid you adieu.
Have a good day.
Today's podcast was produced by SBP. You can find our podcast on all major podcast platforms. Also connect with us on our social media accounts. Search for The Bookers Alliance on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.